What's going on, boys? It is day number 5, reading through the book of Job. We're going to be looking at the second half of one of Job's friends' responses, Eliphaz. So yesterday we looked at a kind of a first half of the response that he gives Job. Let me fix my phone here. We're going to be looking at kind of the second half that he kind of continues on, just providing Job with these reminders and how he should reflect back and remember how God does great things. So we have 3 areas that I want to look at. So it's going to be pretty standard and short video, kind of like yesterday. So the first thing I want to kind of look at is verse 2, where Eliphaz says, "Resentment kills a fool, and envy slays the simple." Now, this phrase is a very a short phrase, but it also can be something that when you really think about it, it has a powerful effect. And one of the things I was able to take away from that is that, I think what he's getting at here is that sometimes, we have to take risk, but with our faith. When we jump into the faith, there's often comes a lot of these challenges that forces you to do things that are sometimes uncomfortable and sometimes are, unpredictable. So we have to, be willing to just take on those challenges. But remember that we have a supporter and have someone who can provide us with the things that we need. And then we also should remember that we should not envy someone else or something else. So we shouldn't look at someone else and be like, man, I wish I could be like that. I wish I could just, have that certain effect. Or in today's world, maybe, man, I wish I had that certain body, image, I wish I could be that, most aesthetic person, or I wish I could have that money, or I wish I could have, those cars or something like that. So, understanding that, faith, requires you to take on things that, are going to be a little bit challenging and are going to force you to kind of, step into areas that are not very, understanding at the beginning, because you have to be willing to trust and take that, leap of faith and, take risks. So I believe that, he's just kind of, reflecting about it. He's like, he's telling Job, like, look, man, like you got to take risks. Like, you can't just let these one things go. Like, you stay faithful and just understand that you must take, continue stepping forward. Like, don't let this one thing be that wall that blocks you from continuing forward. Like, you got to keep going, dude. And I love what he says in verses 8 through 11. He says, but if I were you, I would appeal to God. I would lay my cause before him. He performs wonders that cannot be fathomed, miracles that cannot be counted. He provides rain for the earth. He sends water on the countryside. The lowly he sets on high, and those who mourn are lifted to safety. So, in other words, he's saying, dude, just lay your feelings before God. Lay your feelings, like your frustration and your confusion, lay it all before God, because he is capable of great things that man cannot do. You can't try and sit here and beat yourself up about it and think that things are just going to get better. Just by sitting there saying, man, I lost everything. I just wish I wasn't born. I just wish I didn't have this. Wish I could have just done this. Like, it's not going to get any better because nothing's happening. Like, yes, you're releasing your feelings, but it's not, there's no response. There's no solution. So we must lay our feelings before God, because God is capable of great things. God will provide what is needed and not what is wanted. So in other words, sometimes, we, use this common phrase today that, we should really value our needs before our wants. So we should value our things, like, making sure we have enough food, have enough water, have transportation before we get things we want, like, get certain clothes or food or whatever. So we must understand that, Job is in need of a serious leader. He is in need of a serious type of, I don't have anything. I don't have this, this spark to continue going, because everything has been stripped away from me and I don't know how to respond. I'm in this position to where I don't know what to do. I've never been in this position before. It's one of those things, you 1 minute, you have everything, you have your friends, family, your land, your animals, and the next thing it's total opposite. Like, you don't have anything. I know, he's like, I've never been in this position before. I don't know what to expect. And even in today's world, a lot of people can look at it as, they're rich, they have all these houses, these cars, these big families, and they lose everything. Oh, excuse me. And I can only imagine, because I've never been in a situation like that, to where, I've had so much and then I've just lost all of it. Like, yes, I have lost things to where I've had, X, Y, and Z, and then I've lost X, Y, but I've never been in that position where I've lost everything and I've had to start from ground zero. And I think that, starting from that is just something that, everybody does fear. We talked about, with that, people say, oh, I'm not afraid of anything. Well, I think, people can say that there is something they're afraid of, and that's afraid of losing everything because we don't want to be by ourselves, because we can't do life alone. We shouldn't do life alone, because when we do it with other people, we see our lives being dramatically improved, and we see these, boxes being filled and checked off to help us grow as individuals, because we get to learn from other people and what they say. And oftentimes, God's speaking through those other people saying like, hey, like, maybe you should try this, or maybe you should look at it from a different way, because the way you're going right now, like, it's not getting anywhere. You're constantly just hitting your head at the wall. So I think that, life is just doing that kind of great job of like saying, look, just you remain faithful, understand that, yes, God has taken these things away from you. Yes, but it's not because you are a bad person. It's not because you made any major mistakes. It's not because you disobeyed him or you cursed him. It's because he wants to really show that you are his servant, and that you are willing to do anything, willing to, provide, and, just listen to his commands. And this brings me to the last set of verses to kind of add on to that, where Eliphaz says, blessed is the one whom God corrects. So do not despise the discipline of the Almighty, for he wounds, but he also binds up. He injures, but his hands also heal. So we just mentioned that, God, can take these things away. Yes, he may take things away, but he has the ability to make you stronger. He has the ability to heal you, to, allow his presence to be within your life, to say, hey, you have the King of Kings at your side, willing to heal you when you're injured, and willing to put you back together when you have fallen apart. Put your puzzle pieces back together. Sometimes in life, you have to be broken apart before you can be put back together. And why is that? Well, because when you're broken apart, you have the ability to be put back together in numerous ways. Think of it as the game Jenga. You have all these blocks, and, most people, society, would want you to put up at a certain way. Jenga's, it's 3 blocks one way, 3 blocks another way, and you keep going up and up and up and up. And it's always like that. Well, maybe instead of going like that, and obviously this is just a crazy example. I'm just trying to create something to kind of give you a visual in your head. But maybe instead of following what, the instructions say, maybe look at it as, maybe there's a different way. Maybe there's a different way to put this together. Or maybe there's a different way to do this. Actually, let's use a different example. Let's think about putty, like Play-Doh. Play-Doh is in this container, and it's in there, and you take it out, and you get to look at it, and you can make anything you want out of it. And, when you look at it, and you put something together, and you don't like it, so you break it apart. It's the same way with us. We can be put into different sorts of areas. We can be made into all sorts of different things. But sometimes there's things that we don't like, so we must allow ourselves to be broken, to be ripped apart, not physically, but mentally be ripped apart to the point where we are down to ground zero, to literally the bottom. And we're like, okay, if I want to fix this, I have to go to the root. I have to be willing to go to the very bottom where this thing grabs into the ground, and I have to be willing to rip it out and replant, reap and resow. And when we do that, we are able to be made stronger. God is able to present and place the Spirit within us so we can grow back and made stronger. There's oftentimes, think about how, maybe you get injured, on like a, with a workout or something, and, you can't lift as much weight. You have to drop your weight, but you'll notice over time that the more you progress and the more you stick with it, the more you'll start to notice that weight goes up. And next thing you know, you're using more weight than you were before. So consistency is also a very big thing. We have to be willing to just, allow time to work for itself. Small changes, they may suck because you may not seem like much is going on. You may only get from 1% to 2% instead of 1% to 10%. But, it is progress, and be grateful that you have one incredible person at your side, the King of Kings, God himself. And it is great that we get to share this on Easter weekend. And that is the end of today's word. I hope everybody has a great Easter weekend. I hope to see you guys tomorrow. Peace out, boys.